While everyone sang happy birthday to my baby girl, my husband was outside and with her. The candles on the cake flickered, casting tiny shadows across my daughter's chubby cheeks. It was her first birthday, a day I had dreamed about since the moment I held her in my arms. The living room smelled of vanilla frosting and roasted chicken. Balloons floated lazily against the ceiling. Laughter bubbled around me as relatives clinked glasses and snapped pictures. I should have been smiling too, but my eyes kept drifting to the empty chair at the head of the table. My husband's chair? He had vanished just minutes before we were supposed to sing. He'd leaned in, kissed the top of my head, and whispered, "Just need to take a quick call. Don't start without me." But the cake was melting, and the guests were waiting, and he was still gone. I forced a smile as everyone began the birthday song. My daughter clapped her tiny hands, unaware that her father wasn't there to see it. My throat tightened. The sound of voices blurred, like I was trapped underwater. When the song ended, I slipped away. Something inside me was screaming, and that's when I saw it. Through the half-open kitchen door, his phone glowed on the counter. A name flashed across the screen. Her name. The girl he used to talk about in college. His childhood crush. My stomach dropped. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling. A new message appeared before I could even think. "I'll wait outside, just like old times." The blood in my veins turned to ice. I rushed to the window, and there he was, standing in the driveway, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. And next to him, her hand brushing against his. Her eyes sparkling like she had just stolen something sacred. And maybe she had. I couldn't breathe. My knees nearly gave out as the sound of clapping and laughter echoed behind me. Family still celebrating, voices calling my name. But all I could see was him. My husband, the father of my child. On her first birthday, he was giving his heart to someone else. I didn't scream, I didn't run outside, I didn't even cry. I simply stood there, watching, memorizing every detail. Because in that moment, I understood something vital. Silence could be sharper than rage, and patience could become the cruelest revenge. That night, while everyone toasted to my daughter's health, I toasted silently to something else. His downfall. Back then, I thought the worst betrayal was catching him with her, but I was wrong. Because what I uncovered later, the hidden truth he had kept from me all along, shattered not just our marriage, but everything he believed he could protect. And in the end, my silence didn't just cost him his secret, it cost him everything. So stay with me. Because the story I'm about to tell you isn't just about betrayal. It's about how the truth, when revealed at the right moment, can destroy someone far more than anger ever could. I wish I could tell you that betrayal came crashing into my life like a thunderstorm out of nowhere. But the truth is, storms always leave warning clouds. And mine had been gathering for months. Looking back, the signs were there. Tiny fractures in the glass I refused to see. His late nights working, the sudden way he guarded his phone, the distracted smiles that never quite reached his eyes. I ignored them. I wanted to believe we were untouchable, the kind of couple people envied. And for a while, maybe we were. But every perfect picture has shadows hidden behind it. And in my marriage, those shadows belonged to her, the girl who never really left his heart. To understand why he chose her, on the very night we were meant to celebrate our daughter's first year of life, I have to take you back to the beginning. When I look back now, it's almost laughable how perfect everything seemed. Our house stood like a postcard in the suburbs. White fence, blooming roses, a swing in the backyard for our daughter. Neighbors would smile and say we were the couple everyone wanted to be. And maybe for a while we were. He used to bring me coffee in bed on Sundays, whispering little jokes that made me laugh before I was even awake. We had photos of vacations by the sea, hands intertwined, faces glowing with sun and love. My friends would tell me how lucky I was, and I believed them. But even in the most perfect pictures, there are shadows, and ours began to creep in slowly. It started with his phone. He used to leave it everywhere, on the counter, on the sofa, even forgotten in the car. But suddenly, it was always in his pocket, always locked, always turned face down when he placed it on the table. At first, I told myself he was just being cautious. After all, he worked in finance. Maybe he had sensitive information. but deep down, a knot began to grow in my chest. Then came the late nights. He'd call me around 7. "Don't wait for dinner, love. Big project at work." I would put our daughter to bed alone, listening to the silence of the house. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with the TV on, just to keep from feeling the emptiness. When he finally came home, his tie loosened and his shirt smelling faintly of cologne, I would ask, "Rough day?" And he would just nod, too tired to talk. But one night something slipped. As I folded laundry, I noticed his jacket pocket wasn't empty. A folded piece of paper peeked out. I pulled it free. It was a receipt from a small cafe downtown, not near his office, not near ours. 2 cappuccinos, 2 slices of cake, 2 spoons. I stared at it, my hands trembling. When I asked him about it later, he laughed lightly. "I had a meeting. A client." "Why?" And before I could press further, he kissed my forehead and changed the subject. That's when the unease began to follow me everywhere. Every smile he gave felt thinner. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. Every "I love you" echoed with hesitation. Still, I told myself not to overthink. We had a baby now. He was under pressure. Maybe I was just exhausted, seeing ghosts where there were none. But ghosts have a way of showing themselves. A week later, I was tucking our daughter into bed when I heard him in the living room, speaking softly on the phone. His voice was warmer, lighter, almost younger, like the version of him I hadn't heard in years. I stepped closer, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor. And then I heard it. "It feels like high school all over again." Pause, a laugh. "No, she has no idea." My breath caught. My chest burned. I should have stormed in, demanded answers. But instead, I turned back to my daughter's crib, my hands gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles turned white. Because in that moment, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. I was losing him. But the truth is, I hadn't lost everything yet, because there was still one thing he didn't know. I was already watching. I told myself I couldn't live on suspicions alone. So one evening, while our daughter was asleep and the dishes sat drying in the rack, I finally asked him, "Who were you talking to last night?" His fork froze halfway to his mouth. For a split second, his eyes widened. And then he laughed. "Seriously? You're keeping track of my phone calls now?" My cheeks burned. I hadn't meant to sound accusatory, but his laughter cut like a blade. "It was just a colleague," he added, shaking his head, his tone dripping with mockery. "You really need to stop being so paranoid." Paranoid. That word echoed in my chest like a curse. I tried to explain gently, "It's not that. It's just, you've been distant and nothing," he snapped, pushing his plate away. "I work all day to keep this house standing. Forgive me if I don't have the energy to sit around and entertain your insecurities." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I wanted to shout back, to demand he tell me the truth, but instead I lowered my gaze. Because in that moment, I realized I had lost something even greater than his love. I had lost his respect. From then on, the distance between us grew wider. He began dressing differently for work. Sharper suits, new ties, cologne he had never worn before. When I asked, he brushed it off. Clients expect a certain image. But late at night, while folding those crisp shirts, I caught faint traces of perfume that wasn't mine. A sweetness too floral, too bold. My mind played cruel tricks. I pictured them together, laughing over coffee, sharing private jokes, her hand brushing against his in ways I hadn't felt in months. And yet, I stayed silent. Part of me wanted to believe it was all in my head. Another part knew silence was my only weapon. If I confronted him now, he'd deny everything. He'd twist the truth until I was the crazy one. So I watched. I memorized his new habits. The way he always showered the moment he came home. The sudden passwords on devices that used to be open. The way his phone lit up at midnight and how he would slip out to the balcony to answer. And then, one night, the truth almost walked right through my front door. It was raining, the kind of downpour that makes the world smell like metal and wet earth. I had gone to the window to close it when I saw his car pull up. He didn't know I was watching, and there she was, stepping out of the passenger side. Her face was hidden by an umbrella, but I didn't need to see. I knew. My heart slammed in my chest. I waited for him to follow, to open the door, to introduce her as some excuse of a colleague. But instead, he turned to her. and I saw something I could never unsee. The way his hand lingered at her waist. The way her smile lit up the dark night. They didn't kiss. Not there, not in front of my house. But they didn't need to. The intimacy was undeniable. I pulled the curtain shut, my hands trembling. My daughter stirred in her crib, crying softly, as if she could feel my pain. I pressed my lips against her forehead and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. One day, the truth will come. And when it does, he'll lose far more than just us." Because by then, I knew this wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal that would cost him everything. The night I found the first real proof of his betrayal, it wasn't even because I was searching. It was because he forgot. He had rushed out early for an important meeting, leaving his jacket draped carelessly over the arm of the sofa. I picked it up, ready to hang it in the closet, when something slipped from the inner pocket and fell to the floor. A folded photograph. At first, I thought it was one of ours. A memory of vacations, of our daughter, of the family we had built. But when I opened it, my hands went cold. It was him and her. Not in the present, not recently, but from years ago. Smiling at a fairground, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her like she was the only thing that mattered. On the back, written in his handwriting, were the words, "First love, forever." I sat down, the world tilting. He had kept this for years. Through our wedding, through the birth of our daughter, through every promise he had made to me. And he hadn't let it go. Tears blurred the photo as I shoved it back into the jacket, careful not to leave a trace. Because even then, even with evidence in my hand, I knew I couldn't confront him yet. Not until I had everything. That's when I began to search. Drawers, closets, his study, like the one he always locked, the one he said was too messy for me to organize. Late at night, when he was asleep, I crept inside. My heart pounded like I was stealing from a stranger. The room smelled faintly of old paper and his cologne. I opened the desk drawers one by one, nothing but receipts, pens, scattered files, until I reached the bottom drawer, locked. I knelt down, my fingers trembling as I slid a bobby pin into the keyhole. It took me longer than I expected, but eventually, click. The drawer opened with a reluctant groan. Inside was a small wooden box, polished but worn with age. My chest tightened. I lifted the lid. And there it was. Letters, dozens of them. Some old, yellowed with time, others newer, their envelopes crisp. Each one addressed to him in handwriting I didn't recognize at first. But then I saw her name, over and over again. My stomach twisted. I picked one up, unfolded it, and read the words that would haunt me. When I see your daughter's pictures, I can't help but wonder, what would our life have looked like if it had been me by your side instead of her? I dropped the letter, my hands shaking so violently I could hardly breathe. All this time, she hadn't just been in his past. She had been in his present, in our marriage, in our home, even if only in words and stolen glances. And the worst part? He had kept it all. Hidden, yes, but not destroyed. Because deep down, he wanted to keep her alive in his life. I gathered the letters quickly, putting everything back exactly as it was. I couldn't let him know what I had seen. Not yet. Because in that moment, a realization struck me harder than the betrayal itself. If he had been careless enough to keep these, then there was more. Something bigger. Something he didn't want anyone to find. And I was going to uncover it. The box of letters haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about the words she had written, about the way he had saved every note as if they were treasures. My hands itched to go back, to search for more. And one evening, when he left for another late meeting, I did. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor. I walked into his study, heart hammering against my ribs, and opened the drawer again. My fingers shook as I lifted the wooden box. But this time, I noticed something I had missed before. Beneath the letters lay another envelope, heavier, thicker, sealed with care. I slid it out and tore it open. Inside was a document, bank statements, transfers, money that I didn't recognize, accounts I had never seen, funds moved quietly, names that weren't mine. And one of those names was hers. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. He wasn't just betraying me with love, he was betraying me with money. I didn't even have time to breathe before I heard it, the sound of the front door unlocking. Panic seized me. I shoved the documents back into the envelope, pushed everything into the drawer, and turned the key just as footsteps echoed down the hallway. I barely made it out of the study before he appeared, loosening his tie, his eyes scanning me. "What are you doing in here?" he asked. My pulse roared in my ears. I forced a smile. "Looking for the stapler. I thought I left it in your desk." For a moment, his eyes lingered on me, sharp, suspicious, as if he could hear the pounding of my heart. Then he shrugged, brushing past me. "Next time, ask. This room is a mess." He didn't know, not yet. But as I watched him walk away, a terrifying thought struck me. If he ever suspected I had seen those papers, he would do anything to protect his secret. Anything. The days that followed were a blur of tension. He grew sharper, quicker to anger. A dish left unwashed became a lecture. A question about his day became an accusation in his eyes. And then came the breaking point. We were at dinner with friends when she showed up. Not as a stranger, not as a hidden ghost, but in the flesh. Smiling, confident, sliding into the seat across from me as if she belonged there. "Oh, we go way back," she told them, her eyes flicking toward my husband. "High school, college. We've always kept in touch." My husband laughed too quickly. "Old friend," he said, but the way his hand rested beneath the table, brushing against hers, told a different story. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. And in that moment, something inside me crystallized. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about destruction. Because while he thought he was playing me, keeping secrets locked away, he had no idea I already had the keys. And the truth I held would not only ruin him privately, it would ruin him publicly. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. A family dinner, relatives gathered around a long oak table, candles flickering, the smell of roasted meat and wine in the air. But for me, it was the perfect stage, because I was done being silent in the shadows. He sat at the head of the table, laughing louder than usual, his hand brushing hers under the cloth when he thought no one was watching. She had been invited, of course. "Just an old friend passing through town," he had said, and everyone, too polite to question, had smiled and welcomed her. But I knew, and this time I wasn't alone in knowing. Halfway through dinner, when the conversation dipped into comfortable silence, I stood. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "I'd like to make a toast." Glasses lifted, heads turned. My husband gave me a warning look, one I had seen many times before, a reminder to play the role, to smile and keep quiet. But not tonight. I reached into my bag and placed the envelope on the table. The same envelope I had found hidden in his study, filled with letters and financial statements he never wanted anyone to see. His face drained of color. "What are you doing?" he whispered. I ignored him. I looked at her instead. Her smile froze as I slid one of the letters across the table. "I think it's time everyone hears the truth," I said. The room fell into silence. Chairs creaked as relatives leaned forward. I began to read. Her words filled the air. "When I see your daughter's pictures, I can't help but wonder what our life would have looked like if it had been me by your side instead of her." Gasps rippled around the table. My aunt covered her mouth. My brother-in-law's fork clattered against his plate. "And him?" He reached for the letter, desperate to snatch it away, but I pulled back. "No," I said louder this time. "You've lied to me, to all of us, for years." I dropped the next piece of evidence onto the table. Bank transfers, showing money siphoned quietly into accounts under her name. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. His voice cracked. "This isn't what it looks like." But no one believed him, not anymore, because the evidence spoke louder than his excuses. Relatives turned on him with sharp questions. "You did this to her? To your own child?" His mother's eyes filled with tears. Even his closest friends shifted uncomfortably, no longer able to defend him. And she, the childhood crush who had stolen his heart, finally spoke. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending." Her voice was soft, but it carried like thunder. Every mask he had worn crumbled in that instant. The perfect husband, the faithful father, the man of honor. Gone. The room was silent, except for the crackle of the candles. And then, slowly, I stood taller. "You betrayed me," I said, my voice steady. "You betrayed your daughter? And for what? For a fantasy from your youth? For a lie you were too cowardly to end?" He stared at me, broken, his hands shaking, but I wasn't done. I could have screamed that night. I could have left in silence, but I chose something else. I chose to wait, to watch, to let you believe you were safe. And tonight you lose everything you thought you could keep hidden. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. And in that silence I knew my revenge was complete. When the last word left my lips, the room stayed frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. And then slowly the tide turned. My husband's cousin pushed his chair back with disgust. My mother-in-law buried her face in her hands. Even his father, the man who always defended him, shook his head in silent shame. For the first time, I saw him truly powerless. No excuses, no control, no way out. He tried to reach for me, to whisper something only I could hear, but I stepped back. My silence was louder than any insult I could have thrown. That night, I packed my daughter's things. Her tiny clothes, her favorite stuffed rabbit, the baby blanket that still carried the scent of lavender from our laundry. I carried her out of that house while he sat in the living room, head in his hands, begging me to stay. But I didn't stay. Not this time. The weeks that followed unraveled everything he thought he owned. Relatives distanced themselves, embarrassed to be associated with him. His friends stopped answering his calls. Even at work, whispers followed him, rumors spreading faster than he could contain. The financial statements I had uncovered didn't just expose his betrayal, they exposed his recklessness. He lost his position, his reputation, his steady income. And her, the woman he had risked everything for, didn't stay either. Within days, she was gone, her phone disconnected, her promises evaporating like smoke. He had given her his love, his money, his future, and in the end, she left him with nothing. As for me, I rebuilt, piece by piece. The first night in my new apartment was small, quiet. My daughter's crib stood against the wall, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. But when I looked at her sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling, I realized something. We were free. I no longer had to wait in silence, no longer had to wonder whose perfume clung to his shirt. My home was mine again. My nights were filled with lullabies, not secrets. And slowly laughter returned. Not the forced laughter of a woman trying to convince herself everything was fine, but the genuine laughter of a mother discovering strength she never knew she had. People often ask me if I regret not screaming, not confronting him earlier. But the truth is, I don't. Because silence gave me power. It gave me the patience to gather every piece of truth, to let him dig his own grave without even realizing it. And when the moment came, I didn't need anger. I didn't need revenge and fire and chaos. All I needed was the truth. And the truth destroyed him far more than my rage ever could. Even now, when I pass him in the street, older, broken, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be, I feel no hate, only clarity. He chose betrayal. I chose silence. And in the end, silence rewrote our story. So if you're listening to this and you felt the sting of betrayal, remember, secrets may stay hidden for years, but the truth always comes back to claim its place. Sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly, but always, inevitably. And when it does, it doesn't just break families, it rewrites who we are. Tell me, what would you do if you discovered a betrayal like this? Would you confront it immediately, or would you wait in silence like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. The morning light touched everything, even the places that once held shadows. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could choose what to carry forward. So I folded the letter, placed it away, and let silence heal what words couldn't. If you felt this story in your heart, please leave a like. It helps these stories reach more people who might need them too. And when you subscribe, you join a space where every story reminds us that truth always finds the light. When you leave a comment, tell me the city and country you're watching from. Those small connections remind me we're not alone in finding strength through pain. Thank you for staying until the end.